Hey there, educators, and welcome back to the Make Math Happen podcast. I'm your host, Laneshia, and last week we talked about activating the lesson. We talked about setting the tone, establishing expectations, and igniting students' curiosity. Today, we're stepping even further back to talk about pre-teaching, or what Suzy Pepper Rollins calls acceleration in her book, Learning in the Fast Lane. Whether you call it pre-teaching or acceleration, the goal is the same. We want to make sure every student has the tools, the language, and confidence to jump into grade level learning right away. This episode is about zooming out so that we can zoom in. We do this by planning intentionally so students don't have to play catch up later. And so that we aren't working 3, 4, 5 times as hard later down the road trying to fill in gaps as we prepare for end of grade testing. So let's start with our zoom out. In order to zoom out, we're going to start with your calendar. I want you to pull out that physical calendar or the digital calendar, whichever one you prefer, alongside your pacing guide. And I want you to ask yourself two things. What's coming that's going to stretch my students? Which skills will they need to access that content? When we think about stretching our students, we need to consider things like our unit assessments, whether that is pre or post. We need to consider our universal screeners as well as our exit tickets. Based on student data, we're going to have an idea of what is going to be challenging for students. When we think about those skills that they need to access that content, that's going to require us to have some vertical knowledge as well as some horizontal knowledge as well. So we're thinking about, in order for this student to do this, whether that is dividing fractions, whether that is working with rational numbers in the 7th grade or working with line of best fit in 8th grade, you're going to need to know what are the skills, the prerequisite skills that students are going to need in order to be successful for this upcoming skill. So Lopez Martin and colleagues released an article in 2022. They found that even pre-service teachers struggled when fractions acted as operators. If adults wrestle with those conceptual shifts, we can't assume our students are fully ready either. That's why pre-teaching or acceleration starts here. It requires us to scan those upcoming units, overlay what you know from the universal screener, your pre-assessments, your post-assessments, your exit tickets, and student work samples, and identifying the lessons that could cause friction. Those become your pre-teach opportunities. So once you've zoomed out and you see what's coming up, what's going to stretch them, now we got to zoom in. Once you know where those bumps are, that allows you to be a little bit more intentional. So let's say you've got line of best fit coming up. You know that reading graphs and understanding rate of change are frequent sticking points for your students. Instead of waiting until students get lost mid-lesson, you accelerate their readiness. Okay, how do you do that? Leveraging bell work. Have them labeling quadrants, identifying coordinate pairs, looking at tables, and examining the rate of change. This may seem like we're taking steps backwards, but what we're really doing is positioning our students to be prepared when we get into the grade level content. Later, you can pull a few students and start to revisit that rate of change using some real world examples. Maybe you're comparing walking speeds or tracking growth over time. These moments are short, but they're strategic. Heltson released an article in 2022, and they found that early targeted math interventions, especially those that front load foundational skills, increase readiness for grade level content. In Rollins' word, acceleration isn't slowing down. It's teaching just ahead of the lesson so students can meet the rigor head on. You're not remediating old gaps, you're previewing success. You're giving students an opportunity to recall what they've been exposed to and hopefully learned so that they can be successful whenever that grade level content comes up. Oftentimes we complain about what students are doing in our classrooms, the fact that they have these unfinished learnings, what many of us call gaps, the fact that they are disengaging. A lot of times the disengagement comes from them not understanding what's going on. So if we know from history, from conversations in our PLCs, that these topics have been challenging for students in the past, or we know they're going to be challenging based on what they've shown us thus far, let's prepare for that, right? So when the line of best fit arrives in this example that I've shared, students are going to already recognize rate of change. They're going to be recognizing y-intercept, and they're going to recognize it as something that is familiar because we've spent time moving into this lesson. Before we even got there, we spent time prepping them, right? So now they can focus on reasoning and not survival. They can focus on the reasoning and not disengagement. They can focus on the reasoning and not disrupting your class because they don't understand, okay? So the next part is managing your time, okay? Your calendar is your bestie. That's your co-teacher. Now, I can hear you thinking to yourself, Laneshia, how am I supposed to pre-teach and run these interventions? How am I doing both of these at the same time? The answer, educator, is you plan both through your calendar. Okay, so the Works Clearinghouse released a document in 2021, and they remind us that effective math interventions, and by extension, acceleration, are planned, systematic, and structured. So you need to look across your week for the spaces where learning happens. So one of those opportunities is a bell ringer, like I mentioned earlier. So now we can start talking about vocabulary. We can start talking about models. We can start recalling those key concepts that are going to set them up for success. Homework. You can include one preview problem for the next week's topic, right? So we need to engage them at every opportunity that we have. Another one is in your intervention or enrichment blocks. So divide your time. And I know that that can be challenging depending upon how your intervention or enrichment blocks are planned. But the more intentional we are with the time that we do have, the better things are going to be. Okay. The more impactful that time is going to be. Okay. So 15 minutes is better than 0 minutes, right? So whenever I planned in the classroom, I planned for every single minute. I tried not to have any idle time in the classroom. And we got to have that same mindset with the intervention and enrichment blocks. We have to make sure that students understand that when we come here, we're coming here with a purpose. We have goals in mind, and you are an active participant in helping us reach those goals. So we're not going to have a lot of downtime of you playing in the hallways or you on your computer playing video games and things like that. No, we have things to do, right? So now if I know that the way that my intervention and enrichment block is set up, it's split maybe because we have to go to lunch or whatever the case may be, I need to think about what are the pockets of uninterrupted time I have, and then how can I use them effectively? Okay, so again, dividing that time, you can use half of that time for catching up and half of that time for looking ahead. Now, another thing that's going to be key is parent partnerships. Share upcoming concepts with families so that they can reinforce it at home. So many of us are using newsletters to communicate with families the things that are going on. Make those newsletters a big deal. Include within those newsletters pertinent information that parents can use to set their kids up for success. Make being proficient a big deal. Make success a big deal. Make excelling a big deal to parents. Communicate with them regularly about the things that are happening in your class so that they know what's going on, and then they can do some things at home to make your job a little bit easier. Okay, so acceleration doesn't require more minutes, but it does require more intention. Okay, so here's where language shapes perspective. Pre-teaching can sound like we're trying to get students ready. And we are, right? Acceleration, as Rollins frames it, assumes they're already ready. It assumes readiness. It positions students as capable and simply needing access points to succeed. Acceleration says, you belong in this grade level work. I'm giving you the preview and practice that will let you shine. It's a mindset shift, and it changes everything. Students feel empowered. They're not being remediated. Teachers, you will feel proactive and not reactive, right? It's all about the way we think about things. And the way we think about things is so impactful, right? So here's your challenge for this week. Pull up your pacing calendar, identify one lesson that typically derails students. Design one brief acceleration moment, a 5-minute bell ringer, a short pull aside where you might be working in a small group with a student or a set of students, a preview problem to front load that concept. So again, design one brief acceleration moment, bell ringer, pull aside, a preview problem, then watch what happens. Okay, so Burns released an article in 2004 where they found that pre-teaching key terms improved comprehension. Nelson released that article in 2022, showed that targeted front-loading builds readiness, and the Clearinghouse released an article in 2021 confirming that systematic, well-timed scaffolds produced measurable gains. Rollins calls this learning in the fast lane for a reason. Because when we plan ahead, every student gets to move forward faster. Pre-teaching, acceleration, by any other name, is still a rose, right? Whatever name you use, the impact is the same. Students are going to walk into your classroom already primed for success. You can find the research PDFs I mentioned in today's show in the notes, along with a pre-teaching planner template to help you map your calendar, data insights, and pre-teaching opportunities. Until next time, friends, keep making math happen, one intentional move at a time.